After the Secret Service refused to take President Trump to the Capitol, he returned to the White House. What you see on the screen is a photo of him inside the Oval Office immediately after he returned from the rally, still wearing his overcoat. A White House employee informed the president as soon as he returned to the Oval about the riot at the Capitol. Let me repeat that. Within 15 minutes of leaving the stage, President Trump knew that the Capitol was besieged and under attack. At 1:25, President Trump went to the private dining room off the Oval Office. From 1:25 until 4 o'clock, the president stayed in his dining room. Just to give you a sense of where the dining room is situated in the West Wing, let's take a look at this floor plan. The dining room is connected to the Oval Office by a short hallway. Witnesses told us that on January 6th, President Trump sat in his usual spot, at the head of the table, facing a television hanging on the wall. We know from the employee that the TV was tuned to Fox News all afternoon. Here you can see Fox News on the TV showing coverage of the joint session that was airing that day at 1:25. Other witnesses confirmed that President Trump was in the dining room with the TV on for more than 2.5 hours. There was no official record of what President Trump did while in the dining room. On the screen is the presidential call log from January 6th. As you can see, there's no official record of President Trump receiving or placing a call between 11:06 and 6:54 p.m. As to what the president was doing that afternoon, the presidential daily diary is also silent. It contains no information from the period between 1:21 p.m. and 4:03 p.m. There are also no photos of President Trump during this critical period between 1:21 in the Oval Office and when he went outside to the Rose Garden after 4 o'clock. The chief White House photographer wanted to take pictures because it was, in her words, very important for his archives and for history. But she was told, quote, no photographs. Despite the lack of photos or an official record, we've learned what President Trump was doing while he was watching TV in the dining room. But before we get into that, it's important to understand what he never did that day. Let's watch.
So are you aware of any phone call by the President of the United States to the Secretary of Defense that day?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Are you aware of any phone call by the President of the United States to the Attorney General of the United States that day?
No.
Are you aware of any phone call by the President of the United States to the Secretary of Homeland Security that day?
I'm not aware of that, no.
Did you ever hear the President
No.
ask for the National Guard? Did you ever hear the President ask for law enforcement response?
No.
So as somebody who works in the national security space and with the National Security Council, if there were going to be troops present or called up for a rally in Washington, D.C., for example, is that something that you would have been aware of?
Yeah, I would have.
Do you know if you asked anybody to reach out to any of those that we just listed off? National Guard, DOD, FBI, Homeland Security, Secret Service, Mayor Bowser, the Capitol Police about the situation in the Capitol?
I'm not aware of any of those requests. No, sir.
We have confirmed in numerous interviews with senior law enforcement and military leaders, Vice President Pence's staff and DC government officials. None of them, not one, heard from President Trump that day. He did not call to issue orders. He did not call to offer assistance. This week, we received additional testimony from yet another witness about why the president didn't make any efforts to quell the attack. The former White House employee with national security responsibilities told us about a conversation with senior advisor Eric Hirschman and Pat Cipollone, the top White House lawyer. This conversation was about a pending call from the Pentagon seeking to coordinate on the response to the attack. Mr. Hirschman turned to Mr. Cipollone and said, the president didn't want to do anything. And so Mr. Cipollone had to take the call himself. So if President Trump wasn't calling law enforcement or military leaders, what did President Trump spend his time doing that afternoon while he first settled into the dining room? He was calling senators to encourage them to delay or object to the certification. Here's Kayleigh McEnany, his press secretary, to explain.
All right, then it says back there, and he wants list of senators. And then he's calling them one by one. Do you know which ones he called?
To the best of my recollection, no. As I say in my notes, he wanted a list of the senators, and I left him at that point.
Because the presidential call log is empty, we do not yet know precisely which senators President Trump was calling. But we do know from Rudy Giuliani's phone records that President Trump also called him at 1:39, after he had been told that the riot was underway at the Capitol. Mr. Giuliani was President Trump's lead election attorney. According to the phone records, the president's call with him lasted approximately 4 minutes. Recall that Fox News was on in the dining room. Let's take a look at what was airing as this call was ending.
The president, as we all saw, fired this crowd up. They've all tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 or more, have gone down to the Capitol or elsewhere in the city, and they're very upset. Now, I jumped down as soon as we heard the news that Brett gave you about Mike Pence. I started talking to these people. I said, what do you think? One woman, an Air Force veteran from Missouri, said she was, quote, disgusted to hear that news and that it was his duty to do something. And I told her, I said, there's nothing in the Constitution unilaterally that Vice President Pence could do. She said, that doesn't matter. He should have fought for Trump.
At 1:49, here's what was happening at the Capitol with President Trump's fired up supporters.
We're going to give riot warning. We're going to try and get compliance, but this is now effectively a riot.
49 hours declaring it a riot.
What did President Trump do at 1:49 as the DC police at the same time were declaring a riot at the Capitol? As you can see on the screen, he tweeted out a link to the recording of his ellipse speech. This was the same speech in which he knowingly sent an armed mob to the Capitol, but President Trump made no comment about the lawlessness and the violence. I yield to the gentleman from Illinois.
The next action President Trump took was to tweet at 2:24 p.m. What happened during the 35 minutes between his last tweet at 1:49 and 2:24? His staff repeatedly came into the room to see him and plead that he make a strong public statement condemning the violence and instructing the mob to leave the Capitol. He did not relent until after 4 o'clock when he went out to go to the Rose Garden to film his now infamous go home message. Pat Cipollone was a top White House lawyer. Here's what he told us about his reaction to seeing the violence and his advice throughout the afternoon.
When did you first realize that there was actual violence or rioting?
I first realized that it may have been on television, or it may have been Tony, or it may have been Bill, but I found out that people were, they weren't in the Capitol yet, but they were, and then I started watching it, and, then I was aware.
What specifically did you think needed to be done?
I think I was pretty clear there needed to be an immediate and forceful response statement, public statement, that people need to leave the Capitol now.
My question is exactly that. That it sounds like you, from the very onset of violence at the Capitol, right around 2 o'clock, were pushing for a strong statement that people should leave the Capitol. Is that right?
I was, and others were as well.
Pat, you said that you expressed your opinion forcefully. Could you tell us exactly how you did that?
Yeah, I can't, don't have, I have to, on the privilege issue, I can't talk about conversations with the president, but I can generically say that I said, people need to be told, there needs to be a public announcement fast that they need to leave the Capitol.
And Pat, could you let us know approximately when you said that?
Approximately when? Almost immediately after I found out people were getting into the Capitol or approaching the Capitol in a way that was violent.
Do you remember any discussion with Mark Meadows with respect to his view that the president didn't want to do anything, was somehow resistant to wanting to say something along the lines that you suggest?
And it's not just to be clear, many people suggested it. Not just me, many people felt the same way. I'm sure I had conversations with Mark about this during the course of the day and expressed my opinion very forcefully that this needs to be done.
So your advice was tell people to leave the Capitol, and it took over 2 hours when there were subsequent statements made, tweets put forth that in your view were insufficient. Did you continue, Mr. Cipollone, throughout the period of time up until 4/17, continue, you and others, to push for a stronger statement?
Yes.
Were you joined in that effort by Ivanka Trump,
Yes.
by Eric Hershey,
Yes.
by Mark Meadows?
Yes.
White House counsel's office wanted there to be a strong statement out to condemn the rioters. I'm confident in that. I'm confident that Ivanka Trump wanted there to be a strong statement to condemn the rioters. I don't know the private conversation she had with Mr. Trump, but I remember when she came to the office one time with White House counsel's office, when she came to the chief of staff's office with White House counsel's office, she was talking about the speech later that day and trying to get her dad on board with saying something that was more direct than he had wanted to at the time and throughout the afternoon.
And I think Mark also I remember him getting Ivanka involved because it's like, get Ivanka down here because he thought that would be important. I don't think Jared was there in the morning, but I think he came later. I remember thinking it was important to get him in there too. And of course, Pat Philbin, was expressing the same things. I mean, Pat Philbin, was very, as I said, I don't think there was one of these meetings where there might have been, but for the most part, I remember the both of us going down together, going back, getting on phone calls. He was also very clearly expressing this view.
Pat Cipollone and Cassidy Hutchinson, an aide to Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, also told us about the Hang Mike Pence chants. As you will see, Mr. Cipollone recalled conversations about those chants in the West Wing, but he relied on executive privilege to maintain confidentiality over his and others' direct communications with the president. Although Mr. Cipollone was unwilling to provide more detail, Ms. Hutchison provided more explicit information, filling in those blanks. See that for yourself.
It wasn't until Mark hung up the phone, handed it back to me, I went back to my desk. A couple minutes later, him and Pat came back, possibly Eric Hirschman too. I'm pretty sure Eric Hirschman was there. But I'm confident it was Pat that was there. I remember Pat saying something to the effect of, Mark, we need to do something more. They're literally calling for the vice president to be effing hung. And Mark had responded something to the effect of, you heard him, Pat. He thinks Mike deserves it. He doesn't think they're doing anything wrong. To which Pat said something, this is effing crazy. We need to be doing something more. Briefly stepped into Mark's office.
Do you remember any discussion at any point during the day about rioters at the Capitol chanting "Hang Mike Pence"?
Yes, I remember hearing that about that. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if I observed that myself on TV yet.
I'm just curious. I understand the privilege line you've drawn, but do you remember what you can share with us about the discussion about those chants, the "Hang Mike Pence" chants?
I can tell you my view of that.
Yeah, please.
My view of that is outrageous. And for anyone to suggest such a thing as the vice president of the United States, for people in that crowd to be chanting that, I thought it was terrible. I thought it was outrageous and wrong. And I expressed that very clearly.
With respect to your conversations with Mr. Meadows, though, did you specifically raise the concern of the vice president with him, and how did he respond?
I believe I raised a concern about the vice president, and I again, the nature of his response, without recalling exactly, was people were doing all that they could.
And what about the president? Did he indicate whether he thought the president was doing what needed to be done to protect the vice president?
You have to assert it. That question.
Yeah. Okay. I'm being shut down.
I see.
In addition, Mr. Cipollone testified that it would have been feasible, as commentators on television were suggesting, for President Trump to immediately appear at the podium in the press room to address the nation.
Would it have been possible at any moment for the president to walk down to the podium in the briefing room and talk to the nation at any time between when you first gave him that advice at 2 o'clock and 4:17 when the video statement? Would that have been possible?
Would it have been possible?
Yes.
Yes, it would have been possible.
We just heard Mr. Cipollone say that President Trump could have gone to the press briefing room to issue a statement at any moment. To give you a sense of just how easy that would have been, let's take a look at a map of the West Wing. As we saw earlier, the president's private dining room is at the bottom of the map. The press briefing room is at the top, highlighted in blue, and the Rose Garden, where the president ultimately filmed his go-home video, is on the right next to the Oval Office, and that's highlighted in green.
Ms. Matthews, around the same time, you were watching the violence unfold on television and social media with colleagues, including with Ben Williamson, a senior aide to Mark Meadows and the acting director of communications. You told us that before President Trump sent his next tweet at 2:24, Mr. Williamson got up to go see Mr. Meadows, and you got up to go see Kayleigh McEnany. Why did you both do that?
So Ben and I were watching the coverage unfold from one of the offices in the West Wing, and we both recognized that the situation was escalating, and it was escalating quickly, and that the president needed to be out there immediately to tell these people to go home and condemn the violence that we were seeing. So I told him that I was going to make that recommendation to Kayleigh, and he said he was going to make the same recommendation to the Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows.
Thank you. And one of your colleagues in the press office, Judd Deere, told us he also went to see Ms. McEnany at that time. Let's hear what he said about this critical period of time, right as the rioters were getting into the Capitol.
And why did you think it was necessary to say something?
Well, I mean, it appears that individuals are storming the U.S. Capitol building. They also appear to be supporters of Donald Trump who may have been in attendance at the rally. We're going to need to say something.
And did you have a view as to what should be said by the White House?
if I recall, I told Kaylee that I thought that we needed to encourage individuals to stop, to respect law enforcement, and to go home.
Although President Trump was aware of the ongoing riot, he did not take any immediate action to address the lawlessness. Instead, at 2:03, he called Rudy Giuliani again, and that call lasted for over 8 minutes. Moments later, at 2:13, rioters broke into the Capitol itself. One of the Proud Boys charged with seditious conspiracy, Dominic Pizzola, used an officer's shield to smash a window, and rioters flooded into the building. As rioters were entering the building, the Secret Service held Vice President Pence in his office right off the Senate chamber for 13 minutes as they worked to clear a safe path to a secure location. Now listen to some of that radio traffic and see what they were seeing as the protesters got just feet away from where the Vice President was holding.
They got to the building. Hold. Open that door up. If we're moving, we need to move now. Copy. If we lose any more time, we may lose the ability to leave. So if we're going to leave, we need to do it now.
They've gained access to the second floor, and I've got public about 5 feet from me down here below.
Okay, copy. They are on the second floor, moving in now. We may want to consider getting out and leaving now. Copy.
Will we encounter the people once we make our way?
Repeat.
Encounter any individuals if we made our way to the.
There's 6 officers between us and the people that are 5 to 10 feet away from me.
Stand by. I'm going down to evaluate.
Go ahead.
We have a clear shot if we move quickly. We got smoke downstairs set by unknown smoke set downstairs by the protesters.
Is that route compromised?
We have this is secure. However, we will bypass some protesters that are being contained. There is smoke, unknown what kind of smoke it is. Copy.
Clear, we're coming out now. All right, make a way.
The President's National Security Council staff was listening to these developments and tracking them in real time. On the screen, you can see excerpts from the chat logs among the President's National Security Council staff. At 2:13, the staff learned that the rioters were kicking in the windows at the Capitol. 3 minutes later, the staff said the Vice President was being pulled, which meant agents evacuated him from the Senate floor. At 2:24, the staff noted that the Secret Service agents at the Capitol did not, quote, sound good right now. As this next video shows, the rioters' anger was focused primarily on Vice President Mike Pence.
This woman comes up to the side of us and she says, Pence folded. So it was kind of like, okay, well, in my mind, I was thinking, well, that's it, you know. Well, my son-in-law looks at me and he says, I want to go in.
What percentage of the crowd is going to the Capitol?
100%. It is spread like wildfire that Pence has betrayed us and everybody's marching on the Capitol, all 1 million of us. It's insane.
Not stick up for Donald Trump. Mike Pence, Mike Pence has screwed us. In case you haven't heard yet.
What happened? What happened?
I keep hearing that Mike Pence has screwed us. That's the word. I keep hearing reports that Mike Pence has screwed us.
Did people appear angry as you were walking to the Capitol?
Yeah, a lot of people seem like they were very upset.
Tell us some of the things they were saying, if you recall.
Oh, they were saying all types. You know, people were screaming all types of stuff. They were mad that Vice President Pence was going to accept the electorals. I mean, it was a lot. If you could think it up, you were hearing it.
I believe that Vice President Pence was going to certify the electoral votes or not certify them, but I guess that's just changed, correct? And it's a very big disappointment. I think there's several 100,000 people here that are very disappointed.
President Trump did not try to calm his thousands of disappointed supporters. Instead, at almost the same moment violence was getting completely out of hand, Donald Trump sent his 2:24 tweet. The president said, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution. Despite knowing the Capitol had been breached and the mob was in the building, President Trump called Mike Pence a coward and placed all the blame on him for not stopping the certification. He put a target on his own vice president's back. Mr. Pottinger and Ms. Matthews, when we ask you about your reaction to seeing the 224 tweet in real time, you both use the same imagery to describe it. President Trump was adding fuel to the fire. Mr. Pottinger, you made the decision to resign after seeing this tweet. Can you please tell us why?
Yes. So that was pretty soon after or shortly before I'd gotten back to the White House. I'd come from off-site. I began to see for the first time those images on TV of the chaos that was unfolding at the Capitol. One of my aides handed me a sheet of paper that contained the tweet that you just read. I read it and was quite disturbed by it. I was disturbed and worried to see that the president was attacking Vice President Pence for doing his constitutional duty. So the tweet looked to me like the opposite of what we really needed at that moment, which was a de-escalation. And that's why I had said earlier that it looked like fuel being poured on the fire. So that was the moment that I decided that I was going to resign, that would be my last day at the White House. I simply didn't want to be associated with the events that were unfolding on the Capitol.
Thank you. And Ms. Matthews, what was your reaction to the president's tweet about Vice President Pence?
So it was obvious that the situation at the Capitol was violent and escalating quickly. And so I thought that the tweet about the vice president was the last thing that was needed in that moment. And I remember thinking that this was going to be bad for him to tweet this because it was essentially him giving the green light to these people, telling them that what they were doing at the steps of the Capitol and entering the Capitol was okay, that they were justified in their anger. And he shouldn't have been doing that. He should have been telling these people to go home and to leave and to condemn the violence that we were seeing. And I'm someone who has worked with him. You know, I worked on the campaign, traveled all around the country, going to countless rallies with him, and I've seen the impact that his words have on his supporters. They truly latch on to every word and every tweet that he says. And so I think that in that moment, for him to tweet out the message about Mike Pence, it was him pouring gasoline on the fire and making it much worse.
Thank you both. And let's watch what others also told us about their reactions to this tweet.
I don't remember when exactly I heard about that tweet, but my reaction to it is that's a terrible tweet. And I disagreed with the sentiment. And I thought it was wrong.
What was your reaction when you saw that tweet?
Extremely unhelpful.
Why?
It wasn't the message that we needed at that time. It wasn't going to, the scenes at the U.S. Capitol were only getting worse at that point. This was not going to help that.
We're certainly going to make it worse.
Certainly.
Ms. Hutchinson, what was your reaction when you saw this tweet?
As a staffer that worked to always represent the administration to the best of my ability and to showcase the good things that he had done for the country, I remember feeling frustrated, disappointed, and really, it felt personal. I was really sad. As an American, I was disgusted. It was unpatriotic. It was un-American. We were watching the Capitol building get defaced over a lie.
As you will see, at 2:26, the vice president had to be evacuated to safety a second time and came within 40 feet of the rioters. The attack escalated quickly right after the tweet. During this chaos, what did President Trump do at that point? He went back to calling senators to try to further delay the electoral count.
Do you believe, Jared, that the president has an obligation to ensure a peaceful transfer of power?
Yes.
And do you think the president has an obligation to defend all three branches of our government?
I believe so.
And I assume you also would agree the president has a particular obligation to take care that the laws be faithfully executed.
That is one of the president's obligations, correct?
No, I mean, I asked what his duty is.
Well, I mean, there's a constitutional duty. What he has, he's the commander in chief, and that was that was my biggest issue with him as national security advisor.
Rather than uphold his duty to the Constitution, President Trump allowed the mob to achieve the delay that he hoped would keep him in power.
I think the question is, did you believe that the tweets were not anything about your advice to the president?
No, I believe more needed to be done. Okay, I believed that a public statement needed to be made.
When you talk about others on the staff thinking more should be done, or thinking that the president needed to tell people to go home, who would you put in that category?
Well, I would put Pat Philbin, Eric Hirschman, overall Mark Meadows, Ivanka. Once Jared got there, Jared, General Kellogg. I'm probably missing some, but those. Kaylee, I think, was there, but I don't. Dan Scavino.
And who on the staff did not want people to leave the Capitol?
On the staff?
In the White House, how about?
I can't think of anybody, on that day who didn't want people to get out of the Capitol once particularly once the violence started. No. I mean,
what about the president?
Yeah.
She said the staff. So I answered.
No, I said in the White House.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I thought you said who else on the staff. I can't reveal communications, but obviously I think, yeah.
Let's pause on that last statement. Although Pat Cipollone is being careful about executive privilege, there really is no ambiguity about what he said. Almost everybody wanted President Trump to instruct the mob to disperse. President Trump refused. To understand how inadequate the president's tweets were, let's examine his 238 tweet in more detail. For context, here's what was happening at that time.
They broke the glass. Everybody stay down. Get down.
Doors barricade. There's people flooded the hallways outside. We have no way out.
We were just told that there has been tear gas in the rotunda, and we're being instructed to each of us get gas masks.
We went from a peaceful protest, and this is a very dangerous situation right now, that there are, I'm being told, these protesters on the inside are around both chambers, and there is now tear gas inside the Capitol rotunda. In fact, members locked in the House are being instructed to put on masks.
Ms. Matthews, after President Trump's tweet about Vice President Pence, you told us you spoke to, immediately, you spoke to Kayleigh McEnany. What did you tell her, and where did she go afterwards?
After the tweet about the vice president, I found Kayleigh and told her that I thought the president needed to immediately send out a tweet that condemned the violence that we were seeing, and that there needed to be a call to action to tell these people to leave the Capitol. And she agreed and walked over to the Oval dining room to find the president.
We interviewed Ms. McEnany and others who were in the dining room with the president, urging him to put out a statement. Ms. Matthews, Ms. McEnany told us she came right back to the press office after meeting with the president about this particular tweet. What did she tell you about what happened in that dining room?
When she got back, she told me that a tweet had been sent out, and I told her that I thought the tweet did not go far enough, that I thought there needed to be a call to action and he needed to condemn the violence. And we were in a room full of people, but people weren't paying attention, and so she looked directly at me and in a hushed tone shared with me that the president did not want to include any sort of mention of peace in that tweet, and that it took some convincing on their part, those who were in the room. And she said that there was a back and forth going over different phrases to find something that he was comfortable with. And it wasn't until Ivanka Trump suggested the phrase, "stay peaceful," that he finally agreed to include it.
The president resisted writing "stay peaceful" in a tweet. He told Mark Meadows that the rioters were doing what they should be doing, and the rioters understood they were doing what President Trump wanted them to do. President Trump's message was heard clearly by Stop the Steal organizer Ali Alexander. At 2:38, he told another organizer, quote, POTUS is not ignorant of what his words would do. Rioters storming the Capitol also heard President Trump's message. In this video, you'll see surveillance footage from the rotunda that shows a group of Oath Keepers, including Jessica Watkins, who's been charged with seditious conspiracy. You'll hear her walkie-talkie communications with others as they share intelligence and communicate about President Trump's 2:38 tweet in real time. Again, we warn the audience that this clip also contains strong language.
CNN just said that they evacuated all members of Congress into a safety room.
There's no safe place in the United States for any of these motherfuckers right now, let me tell you.
I hope they understand that we are not joking around.
Military Principle 105. Military Principle 105. Cave means grave.
Trump just tweeted, please support our Capitol Police. They are on our side. Do not harm them.
That's saying a lot by what he didn't say. He didn't say not to do anything to the congressman.
Well, he did not ask them to stand down. He just said, stand by the Capitol Police. They are on our side and they are good people. So it's getting real down there. I got it on TV and it's looking pretty friggin' radical to me. CNN said that Trump has egged this on, that he is egging it on, and that he is watching the country burn 2 weeks before he leaves office. He is not leaving office. I don't give a shit what they say.
We are in the mezzanine. We are in the main dome right now. We are rocking it. They're throwing grenades. They're freaking shooting people with paintballs, but we're in here.
Be safe, be safe. God bless and Godspeed and keep going.
Get it, Jess. Do your shit. This is what we fucking lived up for. Everything we fucking trained for.
Took over the Capitol. Overran the Capitol. We're in the fucking Capitol, bro.
We've now seen how President Trump's supporters reacted to his tweets. Mr. Pottinger, you told us that you consider the tweets sent to this point to be, quote, wholly inadequate given the urgency of the crisis. What, in your view, would have been needed?
Yeah, it was insufficient. I think what you could count me among those who was hoping to see an unequivocal, strong statement clearing out the Capitol, telling people to stand down, leave, go home. I think that's what we were hoping for.
So something a lot more kind of definitive and not ambiguous, because he has that power over his folks. Ms. Matthews, you told us about a colleague who said during the attack that the president should not condemn the violence. Can you please tell us about that moment and your reaction?
Yes, so a conversation started in the press office after the president sent out those 2 tweets that I deemed were insufficient. And a colleague suggested that the president shouldn't condemn the violence because they thought it would be, quote, handing a win to the media if he were to condemn his supporters. And I disagreed. I thought that we should condemn the violence and condemn it unequivocally. And I thought that he needed to include a call to action and to tell these people to go home. And a debate ensued over it. And I became visibly frustrated, and my colleagues were well aware of that. And I couldn't believe that we were arguing over this in the middle of the West Wing, talking about the politics of a tweet, being concerned with handing the media a win when we had just watched all of that violence unfold at the Capitol. And so I motioned up at the TV, and I said, do you think it looks like we're effing winning? Because I don't think it does. And I again reiterated that I thought that the president needed to condemn the violence because it didn't matter if it was coming from the left or the right, that you should condemn violence 100% of the time.
We've heard this evening how everyone in the president's orbit was pushing him to do more, to tell the mob to leave the Capitol. One of those people was Republican leader Kevin McCarthy. He managed to get the president on the phone and told him to call off his supporters. As you will hear, the president refused, and so Leader McCarthy reached out for help to Ivanka Trump, who was at the White House, and Jared Kushner, who that afternoon had just arrived back on a flight from the Middle East.
So at some point in the afternoon, Mr. McCarthy placed a phone call to Mr. Scavino's desk line, and it was transferred to the president. Is that correct?
That's generally what I recall.
Okay. Were you involved in transferring that call?
Yes.
Okay. Where was the president at the time that he took that call?
He was in the dining room.
Would you personally reach out to the president for more support?
I've already talked to the president. I called him. I think we need to make a statement, make sure that we can calm individuals down.
Did Mr. McCarthy indicate that he had been in touch with President Trump?
He indicated that he had some conversation. I don't recall whether it was with the president or somebody at the White House, but I think he expressed frustration that not taking the circumstances seriously as they should in that moment.
I asked Kevin McCarthy
McCarthy, who's the Republican leader, about this. And he said he called Donald Trump. He finally got through to Donald Trump, and he said, "You have got to get on TV. You've got to get on Twitter. You've got to call these people off." You know what the president said to him? This is as it's happening. He said, "Well, Kevin, these aren't my people. You know, these are Antifa." And Kevin responded and said, "No, they're your people. They literally just came through my office windows, and my staff are running for cover. I mean, they're running for their lives. You need to call them off." And the president's response to Kevin, to me, was chilling. He said, "Well, Kevin, I guess they're just more upset about the election, theft than you are." And that's, you've seen widespread reports of Kevin McCarthy and the president having basically a swearing conversation. That's when the swearing commenced, because the president was basically saying, I'm okay with this.
Leader McCarthy, the President of the United States has a briefing room steps from the Oval Office. The cameras are hot 24/7, as you know. Why hasn't he walked down and said that now?
I conveyed to the president what I think is best to do, and I'm hopeful the president will do it.
And have you spoken with his chief of staff?
I've spoken to the president. I've spoken to other people in there and to the White House as well.
Who else reached out to Ms. Trump that you know of that afternoon about the attack on the Capitol?
I believe at one point McCarthy did.
I heard my phone ringing, turned the shower off, saw it was Leader McCarthy, who I had a good relationship with. He told me he was getting really ugly over at the Capitol and said, "Please, anything you could do to help, I would appreciate it." I don't recall specific asks, just anything you could do. Again, I got the sense that they were scared.
They meaning Leader McCarthy and people on the Hill because of the violence?
That he was scared, yes.
Think about that. Leader McCarthy, who was one of the president's strongest supporters, was scared and begging for help. President Trump turned him down. So he tried to call the president's children. Republican House member Mike Gallagher also implored the president to call off the attack.
Mr. President, you have got to stop this. You are the only person who can call this off. Call it off. The election is over. Call it off.
President-elect Joe Biden also went live on TV to demand that President Trump tell the mob to leave.
I call on President Trump to go on national television now to fulfill his oath and defend the Constitution and demand an end to this siege.
There was a desperate scramble for everyone to get President Trump to do anything. All this occurred, and the president still did not act. I yield to my friend from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Kinzinger. President Trump finally relented to the pleas from his staff, his family, and from Capitol Hill for him to do something more at 4:17, 187 minutes, more than 3 hours after he stopped speaking at the Ellipse, after he stopped speaking to a mob that he had sent armed to the Capitol. That's when he tweeted a video telling the rioters to go home, while also telling them that they were special and that he loved them. By that time, although, the violence was far from over. Law enforcement had started to turn the tide, reinforcements were on the way, and elected officials were in secure locations. The writing was already on the wall. The rioters would not succeed. Here's what was showing on Fox News, the channel the president was watching all afternoon.
Back to Brett Baer with more information now. Brett, what do you have?
Our Pentagon team, Jen Griffin, Lucas Tomlinson, confirming the Defense Department has now mobilized the entire D.C. National Guard, 1,800 troops. Takes several hours, as I was mentioning before, to get them up and running. The Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy is setting up a headquarters at the FBI. You just heard from David Spunt that the FBI is also sending troops to the Capitol.
It's no coincidence, then, that President Trump finally gave in and went out to the Rose Garden at 4:03. His staff had prepared a script for him to read, but he refused to use it. As you can see on the screen, you can see the script is stamped "President has seen." The script said, quote, "I'm asking you to leave the Capital Region now and go home in a peaceful way." The president was urged to stick to this script, but he spoke off the cuff. Eric Hirschman and Nick Luna went with the president to film the message in the Rose Garden. Let's hear what they had to say and see the never-before-seen raw footage of the president recording this video message.
Ultimately, these remarks that we're looking at here in Exhibit 25 were not the remarks that the president delivered in the Rose Garden. Do you know why the president decided not to use these?
I don't know, sir. No, I do not know why.
Did the president use any written remarks to your knowledge, or did he just go off the cuff?
To my knowledge, it was off the cuff, sir.
Good, Chase. When you're ready, sir.
Be right behind you.
You tell me when.
When you're ready, sir.
Who's behind me?
He's gone. He's gone around. We're all clear now.
I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had a election. Let me say. I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
When I got there, basically the president just had finished filming the video, and I think he was basically retiring for the day.
Was there any discussion about the president releasing a second video that day?
Not that I recall. When he finished his video, I think everyone was like, "Day's over." People were pretty drained.
We're pretty what?
Drained.
But we say day over. I mean, there were still people in the Capitol at that point, weren't there?
There were people in the Capitol, but I believe by this stage, law enforcement, and I'd have to go back and look, but I believe law enforcement was either there or moving in or going to take charge. I just say people were emotionally drained by the time that videotape was done.
Emotionally drained? At the White House? Here's what was happening at the same time at the Capitol. We warned the audience that this clip also contains strong language and violence.
Hey, keep pushing, don't lose the momentum.
Another officer unconscious. The terrorist. What terrorist?
Everybody, we need gas masks. We need weapons. We need strong, angry patriots to help our boys. They don't want to leave.
While President Trump refused to even lift another finger to help, other leaders honored their oaths and acted to clear the Capitol and resume the joint session. For instance, here are never-before-seen photos and video of congressional leaders in action during the attack. The video is a portion of a call they had at approximately 4:45 with Acting Secretary of Defense Chris Miller.
We're not going to let these people keep us from finishing our business, so we need you to get the building cleared, give us the okay so we can go back in session and finish up the people's business as soon as possible.
Mr. Secretary and Senator Schumer, some people here in the Capitol Police believe it would take us several days to secure the building. Do you agree with that analysis?
I'm not on the ground, but I do not agree with that analysis.
So what is the earliest that we could safely resume our proceedings in the Senate and House chambers? The earliest we could safely resume?
Here's my assessment, but I prefer to be on the ground, which I personally would prefer to be right now, but I need to be here. I would say in this case, we're looking at 4 to 5 hours.
The Vice President also worked the phones from his own secure evacuation location, including conversations with Acting Secretary of Defense Miller and other military leaders, well past President Trump's 417 video. Let's look at some never-before-seen photographs of the Vice President during this critical time and hear about the Vice President's conversation with military leaders to secure the Capitol and ensure everyone was safe.
Vice President Pence, there were 2 or 3 calls with Vice President Pence. He was very animated, and he issued very explicit, very direct, unambiguous orders. There was no question about that. And he was, and I can get you the exact quotes, I guess, from some of our records somewhere, but he was very animated, very direct, very firm, and to Secretary Miller. Get the military down here, get the Guard down here, put down this situation, etc.
As you heard earlier in the hearing, the President did not call the Vice President or anyone in the military, federal law enforcement, or DC government. Not a single person. But General Milley did hear from Mark Meadows. The contrast between that call and his calls with Vice President Pence tell you everything you need to know about President Trump's dereliction of duty. Let's listen.
He said, this is from memory, he said, we have to kill the narrative that the vice president is making all the decisions. We need to establish the narrative that that the president is still in charge and that things are steady or stable or what's that thing. I immediately interpret that as politics, politics, politics. Red flag for me personally, no action, but I remember it distinctly. I don't do political narratives.
So while President Trump and his advisors were drained, other leaders upheld their oaths to do the right thing. Maybe it was exhausting to get the president to put out that video, but think about the law enforcement officers who were attacked by the mob that day. And President Trump had summoned them himself to Washington. And what about President Trump? He watched TV, tweeted, called senators to try to delay the count of electoral votes, called Rudy Giuliani, and argued with his staff who were insisting that he should call off the attack. Ms. Matthews, what was your reaction to President Trump's message to the mob at 417?
I was struck by the fact that he chose to begin the video by pushing the lie that there was a stolen election. And as the video went on, I felt a small sense of relief because he finally told these people to go home. But that was immediately followed up by him saying, "We love you, you're very special." And that was disturbing to me because he didn't distinguish between those that peacefully attended his speech earlier that day and those that we watched cause violence at the Capitol. Instead, he told the people who we had just watched storm our nation's Capitol with the intent on overthrowing our democracy, violently attack police officers, and chant heinous things like "Hang Mike Pence, we love you, you're very special." And as a spokesperson for him, I knew that I would be asked to defend that. And to me, his refusal to act and call off the mob that day and his refusal to condemn the violence was indefensible. And so I knew that I would be resigning that evening. And so I finished out the workday, went home and called my loved ones to tell them of my decision, and resigned that evening.
Thank you. Indefensible. Let's hear what some of your colleagues in the press office told us about their reaction to the same 417 message.
I felt like it was the absolute bare minimum of what could have been said at that point for something on camera.
What else do you think should have been said?
So a more forceful dismissal of the violence, a more forceful command to go home, a more forceful respect for law enforcement, even a comparison to the respect that we have given law enforcement as it relates to what was done to them in the prior summer. And I thought it was important that an acknowledgement be given to the U.S. Capitol building itself, what it's a symbol of, what it means, not only to the people that work there, but to the American people generally, and the work of Congress that by law needed to be conducted that day.
Do you wish, in hindsight, that the president had asked the protesters to leave the Capitol earlier than he ended up asking them to do that?
Of course, I would love if the go home message would have happened earlier in the day.
The president's words matter. We know that many of the rioters were listening to President Trump. We heard from one last week, Stephen Ayers. Let's listen to what he had to say about the 417 message from the president and see how rioters reacted to the president's message in real time.
Well, when we were there, as soon as that come out, everybody started talking about it, and it seemed like it started to disperse, some of the crowd.
I'm here delivering the president's message. Donald Trump has asked everybody to go home.
That's our order.
He says go home. He says go home.
Yeah, he said to go home.
But just as Mr. Ayers said, police were still fending off the last throes of the brutal assault. I yield to the gentleman from Illinois.
While everyone else was working to get Congress back in session, what did President Trump do? At 6:01, just 1 minute after the citywide curfew went into effect, he posted his last tweet of the day. After officers engaged in multiple hours of hand-to-hand combat, with over 100 of them sustaining injuries, President Trump tweeted at 6:01 and justified the violence as a natural response to the election. He said, quote, "These are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide victory is so unceremoniously, viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly, unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and peace. Remember this day forever." He called the mob great patriots. He told people to remember the day forever. He showed absolutely no remorse. A few minutes later, at 6:27, the president left the dining room and he went up to the White House residence for the night. On the screen is the last photograph of the president that night as he went into the residence. As he was gathering his things in the dining room to leave, President Trump reflected on the day's events with a White House employee. This was the same employee who had met President Trump in the Oval Office after he returned from the ellipse. President Trump said nothing to the employee about the attack. He said only, quote, "Mike Pence let me down." Ms. Matthews, what was your reaction to President Trump's 6:01 tweet?
At that point, I had already made the decision to resign, and this tweet just further cemented my decision. I thought that January 6, 2021 was one of the darkest days in our nation's history, and President Trump was treating it as a celebratory occasion with that tweet. And so it just further cemented my decision to resign.
Others agreed with your assessment of that tweet. Let's look at what they had to say.
Who asked you about this tweet before it was sent?
The president.
Tell us about that conversation, everything that you said and he said, to the best of your recollection.
Sure. So he said, "What do you think of this?" And I believe I saw the text message or on his phone. And I remember saying to him, the wording on the first sentence, I guess it's one long sentence, but the wording on the first sentence would lead some to believe that potentially he had something to do with the events that happened at the Capitol.
What did he say?
I don't recall him saying anything in response to that. I believe that was the end of the conversation.
Did he change anything in light of your comments?
No, sir, he did not.
And what about this made you think that someone might perceive the president having a role in the violence at the Capitol?
It was my interpretation of the words. I mean, I'm not I don't write speeches or anything, but the phrase, "These are the things that happened," to me sounded as if culpability was associated with it, to me.
I don't think it's a patriotic act to attack the Capitol, but I have no idea how to characterize the people other than they trespassed, destroyed property, and assaulted the U.S. Capitol. I think calling them patriots is, let's say, a stretch, to say the least.
Is that all it is, a stretch, or just flatly wrong?
I don't think it's a patriotic act to attack the U.S. Capitol.
Would you call it unpatriotic?
Criminal? Unpatriotic, sure.
What happened at the Capitol cannot be justified in any form or fashion. It was wrong and it was tragic, and it was a terrible day. It was a terrible day for this country. I thought it was inappropriate.
Why?
To my mind, it was a day that should be remembered in infamy.